My name, as Jordan said, is Olivia and I am a sophomore here at Cole Valley. I'm going to start by reading Psalm 23, verse 4. It says, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Today, I'm going to be sharing a story of God being with me through my darkest valleys. Like a lot of you, I'm sure, I was born and raised in a Christian family, but I did not have a personal faith in my childhood. My family moved to Idaho when I was 11, and I started discovering Jesus at the church we now attend, Hill City, through their youth group. But I was getting bullied pretty bad in school, and I had no friends, so I struggled with pretty severe loneliness, and ultimately the enemy tempted me with suicide for the first time at the age of 12. The Lord rescued me from that, and I was baptized a few months later, and I started at Cole Valley for 7th grade in the fall. Later that semester, I received my call to missions, and I was very excited about that. I did some research into that kind of context and what that meant, and I did a lot of research in unreached areas where it's very dangerous, and came away with a lot of information about like brutal torture and murders and just really horrible things. And I keep in mind I'm 12, so the natural conclusion I came to was that the Lord was calling me to die, and that was now the purpose of my life. My other conclusion was that if I did want to get support for missions in the future, because I knew that takes money, I needed to look good enough so that people would be willing to support me. So I became very performative in my faith, while at the same time having a very bad relationship with the Lord and hating God. I felt that God had taken away my life preemptively, and I still tried to look good enough. So I was very broken inside. I became very controlling because I felt so out of control in my life, and I got bullied worse here. I wanted to die and get it over with, which was the start of my real struggle with suicidal ideation. The summer before my freshman year, I went on a YWAM outreach trip to some refugees in the area, and while we were up on the YWAM base, I saw people living out the calling of missions as a lifestyle and not just the death sentence. I realized I had it all wrong for the past 2 years and came home on fire for the Lord, ready to really pursue Him as I went into high school. But at the start of my freshman year, I found out that something awful had happened to one of my friends, and ultimately we went into the school year feeling very unsafe. I felt that I had to protect my friends, and I felt like I was failing, so I became very depressed and anxious. By mid-October of 2024, I was suicidal, and I had anxiety attacks most nights, which were brought on by horrible nightmares. I barely slept, and I would lay in bed at night trying to hyperventilate quietly so I didn't wake up my family, thinking of how much better it would be if I just went to be with Jesus now to get the pain to go away. I thought of killing myself most days, and whenever I worked up the courage and went to go and do it, I would suddenly be frozen. It was like there was something outside of me holding me in that place, not allowing me to move. I know now that that was the hand of God, but back then I thought I was weak, and I hated myself even more. My family went to a concert at the end of 2024 for New Year's, and at that concert I almost killed myself 3 times by jumping because I was so angry about how far I had made it, and I felt like I had failed. I made it into 2025 because once again I froze every time I tried, and it was when I woke up in the middle of the night and looked around at my family, specifically my little brother who I was sharing in bed with, that I realized that I couldn't do it, and I couldn't leave my family, and I couldn't leave all these people that I cared about. So no matter how much pain I was in, I had to keep going. I made it to age 15 and tried to find my way out of that mentality. I was still under immense stress to try and protect my friends, but I knew that I had to hang on. Towards the end of the school year, my parents found out what I had been thinking of doing, and I started going to therapy. Everything was looking like it might turn out okay as the school year ended. Then I left at the beginning of June for the mission trip to the Philippines. That was honestly the best 2 weeks of my life. I was finally getting to follow my calling, but it was also incredibly challenging emotionally. At the youth night with the church there, I completely broke down. I realized that I didn't want to live, and that if God hadn't saved me, I would have ended my own story less than 6 months before getting to do what I've been working towards for over 2.5 years. I realized I needed to take my own faith more seriously, and I had come home ready to begin that process. But it wasn't until I was back in the States in my normal, everyday life that it hit me. I had to see starving little kids and people living in such immense poverty that it's impossible to describe. And I was emotionally broken from seeing that. I started struggling with hallucinations. I would just randomly be back in the Philippines for a few seconds, and then I would come home, and I just didn't know what to do. At the same time, my little sister's mental health was rapidly declining. She struggled with severe contamination OCD, which basically turned her mind into a prison. I knew she was also suicidal, and there was nothing I could do to reach her. Everything fell apart again at my church camp at the end of July. I completely broke down, seeing the brokenness in the world, the starving kids, my broken family, my struggling friends. It was all too much. I didn't know how a good God could allow all of this, and I didn't know if I could be a Christian anymore. I prayed that whole week for a sign because I didn't want to walk away, and I prayed that God would show me that He was good and that this was part of His plan. The last night of camp, I did receive that sign. The speaker on stage called God the Lord of the Harvest, which is the name of the church in the Philippines. I knew that was God telling me to wait, and I completely broke down. I went home very unsure what to do, but I knew He had a plan, and I chose to have faith. I began to pray on my knees every day for my little sister's life, but as the school year began, it became very clear that we were running out of time. We were told that we had 5 weeks until she needed to be institutionalized. There was 2 weeks left when we went to California for my grandma's 80th birthday. Audrey seemed very different the whole trip. While she was still unable to be close to us, she was able to get close to my little brother multiple times for the first time in months. When we flew home the next day, I can't speak to what was happening in her head, but my mom and I could tell that something was very different. We made it home exhausted from our travels, and when we woke up, everything had changed. I walked into the kitchen, and Audrey walked over and gave me a hug. I hadn't hugged my little sister in over a year. We completely broke down, my mom, my sister, and I. She was healed. She had an next appointment with her therapist, and she couldn't believe it. In 5 days between their appointments, Audrey had gone from being worse than extreme to subclinical, which means she couldn't have even been diagnosed at that time. God performed a medical miracle to save my sister's life. I realized that I had to take my faith seriously now. This was the 3rd time I'd come to that resolve, and this time I decided to follow through with it. In the last 6 months of just trying to submit to Him, even though I mess up every single day, the Lord has completely transformed my life. My anxiety is almost completely gone, and I've been fully healed of my depression. God is good, and He has a plan, and it is not just for me, and it is not just for Audrey. God has a plan for every single one of you in here. He has a purpose and a plan for your life. And I know we've all gone to Christian school for a while, and we're all pretty used to hearing that, but it is true. And I know that some of you are also fighting through some horrible things. And I know how easy it is to lose hope. But Jesus genuinely loves you guys. He wants to help you, and I'm not saying that He'll miraculously make everything right. Because honestly, He probably won't. He didn't fix me overnight, but He did really begin the process of sanctification in my heart. Sanctification is when you accept Jesus into your heart and He begins to transform it. If I'm gonna be really honest with you guys, this school needs a lot of sanctification. I'm now going to read Matthew 22:37 through 39. And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." Those are the two things that Jesus said sums up all of the law and all of the commandments. Loving God and loving others. And being honest with you guys, sometimes we don't do the greatest of that. Sorry, I lost my spot. God has been speaking to myself and multiple other students over this year, and he has given us a vision of sanctification and redemption for the student body. He wants to spark a revival of the Holy Spirit in our hearts, in the heart of every student sitting in this room. Imagine what our school would be like if we were actually engaging during worship and didn't care what others were thinking. If we made our advisors a safe place for community to support one another and lift one another up. If we lifted one another up in our friend groups and chose to love one another and view our classmates as they are, image bearers of Christ. The Lord has a vision for this school, and he wants every one of you to join it. He loves each and every one of you guys and has a plan for you, and he's inviting us all to step into it. Love you guys.